Committee on Technology for Thursday, November 30th, 2023. Please come to order. Clerk, read the roll.
Adel.
Here.
Bella.
Here.
Drake.
Here.
Ardot. Gentile.
Here.
Salami.
Buddies had a procedure today and everything worked out well, so.
Taylor.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Approval of the minutes of the November 16th meeting. The motion?
Second.
Second. Are there any additions or deletions? Okay. Not all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm sorry. Did I do that? Made a mistake here. Public comment relative to agenda items. What's the radio?
It was iPads. It's good.
No, okay. Presentation by CTech Energy Sales Incorporated. I asked that we have CTech back because in my assessment of what we've gone through, this seems to be one of the only commercial operation, and there's questions that were raised after we went through this, and I'd just like to get an update from CTech in terms of what you're doing in the area and the technology. Has the technology changed? Because we haven't seen anything. I know when we talked originally, you were talking about hydrogen was going to be something that you were dealing with. And I was just wondering whether in your process that there's been changes to what you presented, which was what, 3 or 4 months ago?
Yeah, August 10th.
August, yeah. So it's been quite a bit of time. And we had allowed, I believe, Kelly, can you get to a microphone so we can talk? You've had discussions with others. You've asked if there was other people that wanted to come back before the board, and
No, we have not. The board did not give us that. The committee did not ask us to do that.
I thought that we said that anybody who wanted to come back could come back.
In that meeting, we were not given that direction to do that. We were
Okay.
given the direction to have CTEC back.
Okay.
And either during that meeting or shortly thereafter, we were asked to get a status update from REA, which we did and provided at the previous meeting to this one.
Well, I know when we talked about bringing CTEC back, there was a question of would other people want to do that?
Mr. Chairman, I think that was in my motion. Maybe it didn't translate into the minutes properly, but I thought we said in the motion that we wanted CTEC or anybody else who felt like they needed to provide additional information. So
Well, I
it
thought
wasn't
that
just
was one of
limited
the
to that.
considerations to protect the integrity of what we were doing was that if other people wanted to come back, we did have at least two, I think there was 2 groups that didn't, what was it, VOW or not VOW, Green was going to come in and then change their mind because of proprietary information. And then who else was?
LCI for the dryer and CDM Smith.
Well, didn't LCI come in?
They did.
They came in on the dryer and they made a presentation, and CDI came in and they had a very extensive.
Presentation on multiple technologies.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Correct.
Chris Stone wants to speak.
Chris?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Chris Stone, District Council. To Commissioner Adel's point, I listened to the tape of the meeting, and in his statement regarding the resolution, he's absolutely, he made a statement that he would have no objection to having other responders come back for a second time or inviting them to come back for a second time, but it wasn't part of his actual motion. And so there was a stated intent, or preference, I should say, but not part of the motion. It was just to have CTEC come back.
Thank you.
Is that,
I guess
that was your
He
intent?
listened, he
Yeah,
must
yeah.
know. Yeah, that was my.
Or you could listen to the tape. I mean, it's pretty clear, Commissioner, but if you
No,
want to
I'm
make
not
that, want to
questioning.
make that motion now, then feel free to, that's fine.
No, Chris, I wasn't making that representation. I was just.
No, I know
saying-
you weren't. No, I was talking to Commissioner Adel. I don't want to misstate what I recall and what I heard on the audio tape. So
Yeah,
if he has a
right.
different recollection, I respect that.
Okay.
No.
So, again, that's why I wanted to hear from CTEC, to see they constantly were, at least before, you had PFAS technology that you've, had, have patents pending and things of that nature. I just wanted to have you come back and give us an update if there is technology. Hydrogen was an issue that you were talking about in going through your presentation in August. You do have in there that you do use hydrogen to increase heat transferring capacity and things of that nature. I was just wondering, and that for my own purpose and the committee for information, could you bring us up to date?
Sure. Let's see if we can do a refresher just to kind of get everybody up to speed again. So we have two technologies. CTEC stands for Clean Thermodynamic Energy Conversion. Company was founded in 2010 in the UK by Mike Burns, who had been in the automotive industry for over 30 years as an engineer. In his last position, he was the chief engineer at Daewoo Motor Corp, but he had worked at Ford and Ricardo and so on. Mike had observed during those years that heat was coming off engines and going into the atmosphere. Everybody was looking at that as a cost. And he was feeling like there's an opportunity, there's a financial opportunity here. So when he retired in 2010, he formed CTEC. They spent 6 years of heavy research and development and putting the first patents together. So between 2010 and 2016, he developed the concept. He figured out how to repurpose that heat. And since then, there are over 40 plants now in England, France, Germany, Czech Republic, and Italy, with the majority of them in Germany and a good portion in England. They've been very, very successful, no problems, no breakdowns. So what does the CTEC plant do? CTEC plant destroys waste thermally. Any waste that lived, the only things that we can't put through there are metal and asbestos, glass. We could actually cut the glass up and everything, but you're not going to thermally destroy it. But anything that lived, whether it was food waste, MSW, medical waste, plastics, cardboard, sludge, tires, fat oils and greases, on and on and on. Our system does not discriminate against any of it. There are formulas depending on what you're putting in. So you can't put 100% tires in. You can only put 50% tires in when you're putting it in because of the BTU content that's in the tire. Plastics, you can only put 75%. So you always have to put MSW or something else in there to mix so that you're monitoring the BTU level. One of our first plants, I know you were very interested in medical waste. There was a big conversation about medical waste when I was listening in another meeting recently. New Haven Hospital, East Sussex in the UK, about 60 miles outside of London. And that was one of our first installations 7 years ago. Still there, doing 18 tons of waste a day, handling all of their medical waste, all of their regular waste. We've gotten rid of their transportation and disposal costs and the carbon footprint associated with those activities. And we're producing, we're not emitting. Our emissions are virtually zero. And we're significantly less than anything in the EU standards or the US standards. And we can have proof of that. And On top of that, we're not pulling from the grid. We sustain ourselves, so we're not using biofuels or fossil fuels. We only need 200 kilos of propane on the initial startup, and that's it. And then what we're doing also is we're providing the hospital with 20 gigawatt hours annually of thermal energy that they're using to heat and cool the hospital. And we're also producing close to 3 gigawatt hours of clean, renewable electricity that they're selling to a port in the town to help power the port. Medical waste is not a problem, and it's a big opportunity here in the United States because Stericycle is a medical waste monopoly. And I'll talk a little bit further about that. So C-Tech is the first technology, and the footprint of a typical C-Tech plant is 115 feet long, 65 feet wide, about 12 feet high for the majority of it, but at 20 feet high at the hopper where the waste is going in. The sludge plant that we developed is basically a double size of that, and that can handle 5 ton an hour of sludge coming through. And I have a diagram that I brought in, which we had passed out previously, just so you can see the configuration of that plant. So that's C-Tech. Maximum Yield Technology, MYT, developed in France by a Brazilian who is also a minority shareholder of C-Tech UK. So the two companies have worked very, very closely in developing their technologies, and MYT actually uses our heat exchanger, and so on. So, and yes, we actually do destroy PFAS, and we have 2 patents pending. I think one of them might have been approved. My partner Peter is on. He can fill in when I get finished and answer any technical questions or anything I might have missed. So no one that we know is destroying PFAS. And we have 4 different temperature ranges and it's all Celsius. So MSW and the like, somewhere between 400 and 800 degrees Celsius. Medical waste is destroyed at 900 degrees Celsius. PFAS and all forever chemicals, CFCs, PFCs, et cetera, they're all destroyed at 1100 degrees Celsius. And actually hazardous waste is destroyed at 1400 degrees Celsius. So Maximum Yield Technology is a different footprint. That's a 20-acre footprint, can handle 150,000 tons of MSW annually. And we can actually scale that higher if we need to. But it uses our technology. And so the garbage trucks literally drive in, everything is enclosed. There are 5 different processes in there. They dump the garbage, they drive out. We put that garbage through all of those processes. And so basically 70% of everything that comes through an MYT is recycled or repurposed, which is higher than what Connecticut has put out as the goal for 2025 at 60%. We're already at 70%. The 30% that we can't squeeze blood out of a stone on, we're running it through 7 C-Tech plants on the back end. So we're completely destroying that. We're creating our own clean energy to sustain ourselves. There's excess usable energy to sell. In terms of what we take out of the garbage, we're pulling out all the carbon dioxide, which we can sell to greenhouse growers. We're pulling out all the water weight. It's 38% of the MSW's weight is in water. We're pulling that all out. We're cleaning it. It's PFAS free when we finish. You can actually drink it if you want, but at the very minimum, it could be used cleanly for agriculture with no problem. So it's 38%. You're pulling about 50,000 tons of water out and being able to reuse that and recycle it. We're pulling out all the rare earth minerals, all the regular minerals, et cetera. So essentially nothing ever goes to a landfill or an incinerator again. You might have 1 to 3% max that comes through that might go in that situation. And it would probably go to be like construction and demolition stuff that would accidentally make its way through, you know, like or a refrigerator or something like that. But everything else that comes through, we can handle it. So the crisis that Connecticut faces right now is in waste and in energy. And they're not alone. Every state in the Northeast, whether they're New England or the Mid-Atlantic, everybody has the same problem. We're talking to everybody in every state. And it's the same issue. Everybody's shipping their waste out. And, you know, the carbon footprint and the expense that's associated with those activities is another whole animal on top of the fact that you're not getting rid of it in your own state. So not only could we prevent it from leaving the state, we could actually prevent the waste from leaving the county and cut down on all the costs. And it would be, as every green box that DEEP could ever want to check would be checked. And on top of it, we're reducing operating expense across the board between the two technologies. So, and in most cases, in Europe, what's happening is, as green as they are going for the technology because of the reduction in operating expenses. The bonus, the cream on top, is that we are cleaner than anything else out there. If you look at some of the other opportunities, so one of the things that's occurring in the UK, they're creating microgrids. So they're putting together a bunch of CTEC plants, and they're taking in tires and medical waste and textile waste and plastics, and they're destroying them thermally with no emissions, and they're taking all of that clean energy and pumping it right up into the grid. So there's a tremendous opportunity to get rid of our waste and use it as clean, renewable energy. It's much more reliable and it's much more efficient than wind and solar will ever be. And it's extremely much, less money in terms of what you have to spend. So if you look at, medical waste, about 20 or 30 years ago, what happened here in this country, all the big players, Waste Management, BFI, Republic, those are the guys at the time, they all threw their hands up and they walked away from the medical waste. And the reason is that there was too much liability. They would just go, all that was winding up in landfills, and they were all liable 20, 30 years down the road if something happened in that landfill to be sued and just absolutely have incredible, liability that would come back to haunt them. Stericycle came in and took it all. So basically they're the medical waste, monopoly right now. What's happening on the East Coast, there are 2 incinerators. One is in Virginia and the other one is either in Tennessee or Kentucky. All of the medical waste winds up in those places, and it is extremely expensive. Everything's picked up in 20 or 30 pound boxes, and then it's shipped. And the hospitals, are paying way more than they should be. But because they have extreme buying power with a lot of, facilities, they can cut it down. However, the local doctors, dental offices, the acupuncturists, the urgent care, all of those practices are paying through the nose. This would be an opportunity to allow the local haulers to get back into that business. And instead of having on the manifest that it went to a landfill that could come back and bite them 20 or 30 years later, they could actually show the date and the time that this waste was destroyed, and there would be no liability. So you could actually, it could have an effect that Amazon, a typical type of effect that Amazon had for retail, it could happen in that particular market. And all of the waste haulers locally could benefit from that. Then if you look at plastic waste, 7 billion tons of plastics have been produced to date. Less than 10% have been recycled. 400 million tons of plastic are produced annually. 85% wind up in a landfill, or it's lost to the environment. It will stay there for like hundreds or thousands of years, whether it's in the ocean or whatever. Textile waste, what they call fast fashion waste. 92 million tons of textile waste produced annually. That equals 1 garbage truck full of clothes ends up in a landfill site every second of the day. All of these waste streams have incredibly high BTU value that could be used to create clean, renewable energy. So you get rid of the garbage problem and you're getting rid of the the electric problem. Connecticut is the second highest state in the United States for electricity cost. We're only behind Hawaii, and it's only going to go up because Eversource and the like put their rates up 100% earlier this year. And I will probably be #1 by the time we get through that. Food waste, you don't have to worry about separating food waste anymore. We can take care of it. We can create clean, renewable energy. It could all be separated, and you don't have to worry about having these special programs where so on and so forth. There's a company called Use Energy, and they clean all of the recyclables out of their MSW, and then they take all the MSW and they create fiber to make paper out of it. We talked to them about a year and a half ago, and I said, what's your biggest problem with the recyclables? Because the recyclables all get cleaned and they get put in their own bins, whether it's metal, plastic, glass, wood, etc. And they said, plastic, we can clean it. We have a very difficult time selling it. So I know that there is like 13 different classifications for plastic waste, and type 1 and type 2 are the ones that you can reuse to actually make, more plastic products. In reality, that really never happens when you look at how much is winding up in the oceans and in the landfills. So if they can't sell it, we can actually thermally destroy it and create clean, renewable energy. It's better than winding up in the ocean or the landfill. Hughes is now putting a big facility up in Nevada on the California border. And I talked to the attorney who was involved in that company about a month ago. And he basically said, Chris, we are going to buy 2 CTEC plants to get rid of all the plastic that we can't sell. And it's going to power us up. It's going to give us all the thermal and all the electricity that we need to run ourselves. So it's going to reduce our operating cost and also get rid of the problem for how do we get rid of the plastic after we clean it. Tires. I know that there was legislation in Connecticut this past year where they're going to use it in road fill or whatever, and there's still runoff that happens. So it's still polluting. In the town that I live in, Farmington, I was talking to the chief engineer recently, and he said it's happening more and more. All of a sudden, they wake up one morning and there's 80 or 100 or 200 tires just dumped in a really nice area of the town. Nobody knows how it's gotten there. And he told me that he was been talking to Bristol recently, and same thing, like 200 or 300 tires wound up in a nature preserve. So we can take those tires. We can make clean, renewable energy out of it. Used motor oil, fog, fats, oils, and greases. We could take that. We could create microgrids, throughout the state. So not only could we get rid of the waste problem that we have, but we could also get rid of the electricity problem that we have. And we could probably bring that cost down by doing that. And I know that there's this concern that we're going to have enough electricity, to power ourselves up. Especially, I know that the EVs got knocked down in the last week or so, but they're going to be putting up charging stations. And where are they getting their electricity? From the grid. And so wind and solar is not going to power the grid enough to be able to take all that excess and power up the electricity in the charging stations. This is a hand in glove solution to get rid of the waste problem and fix the energy problem at the same time. We create clean thermal, clean electricity, and we have the opportunity with an add-on part from Air Liquide, which is one of the top hydrogen companies in the world. They're French, but they manufacture it here. We can add that part on to create hydrogen, and that will minimally increase our electricity production by 50%, probably more. We were talking, it's funny. I was up at NEBRA just a few weeks ago. I went last year and spoke, and this year I just went up and was listening. Again, everybody's talking about PFAS. A woman got up from Halifax in Canada and made an impassioned speech about why the rest of the states can't make the same mistake that Maine did and not allow them to land apply, because all the farmers are up in arms because they can't use that as fertilizer anymore. And the problem is that it was seeping into the aquifer, and the PFAS was getting into the water table and perverting it and contaminating it. And it was also it was winding up in the cow's milk, because they were eating the grass and so on and so forth. So we have formed a joint venture with a green ammonia company, and we could put 2 CTEC plants next to each other. We could put 5, they're very small, green ammonia plants next to us. We can give them all the electricity that they need to power up, and we can also provide all the hydrogen that they need to create the green ammonia. The green ammonia can be used to create fertilizer and green fertilizer. So after that woman finished speaking up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, I approached her and I went through this with her and she said, I absolutely am very interested because she said, I think this might be a solution where we can continue to use the biosolids to help us create the green ammonia. And we can maybe form our own local fertilizer company so that the farmers can benefit from that. So we're in the early stages of that discussion right now.
What-
Go ahead.
Deep, EPA, where do you stand relative to permitting? Because I believe that's been one of the major problems you're dealing with. Sir,
Well, Janine Burkwells, who's listening in today from NEBRA, set up a meeting for us last December. And we had Nisha, we had Jennifer Perry and Gabrielle, who's on right here. All three listened to us make this presentation. And I asked, Nisha was the point person of the meeting because that's how Janine made the appointment. And I asked Nisha, how do we fast track something like this? And she said, well, if you can find an organization or a company that has the land that's willing to do this, we'd be willing to listen and see what could be done. And so that's where we are right now. We have not had another meeting with Deep since then, other than for Gabrielle, who was here on August 10th, listening in on what we had to say that day. There's 6 years ago, we knew we had a problem. 5 years later, they shut the incinerator down. And it was 5 years now that we've decided to send our waste out of the state. Well, we're 1.5 years into that program. We've got 3.5 years left. We could conceivably, if everything fell into place, if Deep would permit it, we could build MYT plants. In Europe, it's taken us 18 months to build an MYT plant because there's civil engineering that's involved and so on and so forth. But we could conceivably come in under the wire if everybody moved quick enough. But that's a big if. I think the governor and I think, the House and the Senate are going to have to get involved and create legislation to move this. We've talked to the chairman of the Energy Committee in the House and also the chief of staff of the Energy Committee in the Senate. And they are both very, very interested in what we are doing and are willing to try to move this forward. It's up to Connecticut, but we could actually, by the time the 5 years runs up, that started in July of 22, we could conceivably have this thing fixed. But, if not, within a year or two after that, but we could be on our way to doing it. But you would probably need at least 6 MYTs to fix this. But we could actually scale up. We could take it from 150,000 tons to higher than that. So you might not need 6, depending on how much land is and so on.
you mentioned hospital waste. Obviously, that's a problem.
Yep.
And it seems that, at least in Europe, that you're more into that area of, in terms of pursuing it, the industry, medical industry, and you're doing it in Europe.
Well, we have,
Have you had discussions with Deep on the utilization of your technology relative to hospital waste in the United States?
no, other than the December meeting that happened last year, there have been no other meetings. We were setting up our, getting our ducks in a row. So the town that I live in, Farmington, I met with the mayor, the town manager, and the chief engineer, and over a period of time, they agreed that they were all in if we could get it permitted. And basically for Farmington, we could put it right next to the wastewater treatment plant. We could handle all their sludge, and we could actually handle all of the town's municipal waste. So that what would happen is the waste would not only not be leaving the state, wouldn't be leaving the county, it wouldn't be leaving the town. And we did an analysis of this, and they said, listen, we'd be very, very interested to do this. If you can get it permitted, we're all in. On top of that, we don't want to go to a referendum in our town. So if you could figure out a way that we don't have to pull a dime out of our pocket, we'd be happy. So we came back a week later and said, here's what we can do. We'll come in as owner operators for the first 5 years. We'll get our money back and then some. We'll sell it to the town for $1 at the end of 5 years. And for the next 20 years, you'll have a minimum of $180 million in free cash flow from the savings that will provide the town. So they said, make it happen. So, I mean, we've got other conversations going like that right now.
There are other questions. I don't want to dominate this thing. Commissioner Taylor, then we'll run them.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I guess one of my questions for you, you have these plants in operation in Europe, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
In terms of where they're located relative to population centers, can you give us some idea as to, are they in the center of town or are they in a suburban community? I mean, where are they located in terms of the actual site?
Well, let me start by saying that this is the most environmentally just situation you'll ever come across. Now, I didn't say this before. The MYTs, there are only 4 of them in the world. There are 2 in France, 1 in Germany, and 1 in Bangkok. But we have a video that we could show, and it's 20-acre footprint. The MYT is literally surrounded by grazing, grasslands, with, animals grazing on them. That's how clean they are. And the Europeans are much stricter than we are in terms of how they look at this. But my partner, Peter Wild, who hasn't said anything because I've monopolized this so far, could probably fill in and maybe even answer that question a little bit more. Peter, anything that I didn't say that you want to add, and also to answer this gentleman's question, to give him a little bit more comfort about
Yes.
an answer.
Yeah, hi team, Mr. Chairman and the board, Peter Wild here. I've written down a few notes. I'll just dive through them in order. The chairman asked about hydrogen. Chris mentioned air liquide. That's quite correct. The hydrogen unit bolts directly onto the gasifier, and it produces 880 Nm per hour. Now, I just need to expand a little bit on hydrogen. It's a bit of a buzzword in the industry at the moment, to be used as a fuel cell, but it's a relatively dangerous product to store and to transport, which is what led us down the line to the green ammonia, because Chris did mention that green ammonia is very, very valuable fertilizer source, but the green ammonia is safe to store, can be transported, and on site you can split that down back to a hydrogen source. So there's a couple of options with the use of hydrogen. There was also a question about, and I believe this came from the chairman as well. In Europe, it would seem that we have a favour and a flavour towards processing medical waste as opposed to anything else. That's partially true, and there's a very, very simple answer for it. In Europe, it's 435 pounds or 380 euro per metric ton as a tipping fee versus 115 euro municipal. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a bean counter to work out that the favoured product is to process medical. MYT, of course, is a straight municipal waste. Then the third question, which was the latest one, locales, obviously because of its footprint, MYT need to be located close to a volume of 150,000 tonne a year. CTEC, its locales are directly on site with hospitals, directly on site with housing developments, directly on site with large universities and more suburb based because of the small footprint. So it's because it's so small, we can sneak it in. Obviously, it's on site at water treatment plants as well. So CTEC doesn't have to be out in the boondocks. It can be right in town in need. We've actually got a couple of plants being manufactured at the moment for export down into Australia. And that's actually quite interesting. They're putting them in the basement of 20-story high-rise hotels. So, and they're right on, they're in the Gold Coast in Australia. So, I mean, they're right in a mass, extremely exclusive holiday residential area. And it's due to the fact that our emissions aren't worth talking about. So those facilities will actually power the entire hotel, and they're going one step further. They're using ducted heating and also our absorbed chiller units for air conditioning. So it's a green development. So in the suburbs, what seems to be happening is that it's quite strange actually. Developers, property developers, are working out that on a 3-bedroom, luxury sort of development, they can stick a CTEC plant in there, which will take all the waste streams from those particular houses and provide all their heating and cooling and electricity. They've actually thrown an extra £6,000 per sales price on top of the homes that they're selling, and they're selling the whole development as green. So they're actually making money out of saving money, which is interesting. So I think those were the 3 questions I had to answer at this stage.
Yeah. Peter, just a moment, then we'll follow up questions. The comparison you made from the United States to Europe, what was, you said what's 435 euros? Is that the cost in the United States as compared to
No,
160?
in the States, that sounds like Bill's voice. Hello, Bill.
Yeah.
In the UK, medical is £435 per metric ton. Okay, now we've done estimations across the United States, and it averages out at just over $400 per short ton on bulk hauls. If you break that price down and look at the 30-pound boxes that Chris mentioned, which are coming from the smaller units, there's just one thing I must say about medical too. We don't have to separate bags. In other words, we can take sharps and everything like that through our technology. So that's actually a beneficial to the sorters. But the average price in the States, $400 on the small 30-pounders. If you convert that out into a tonnage, it's nearly $3,000 a ton. Then on top of that, you've got all your transport costs as well. It's absolutely criminal what's happening in the States with medical waste, but it's a golden opportunity.
Excuse me, Peter. So you're saying it's $3,000 whatever the can is. What's the relative cost in Europe in your process to a similar application in Europe?
You'd have to do the conversion. I've only got the figure in pounds, 435.
435 euros.
No, pounds.
Sterling.
Okay. I guess what I'm trying to figure out, what would be the unit cost in the United States versus Europe in this with this technology relative to Europe's application?
I
other words-
would stick at the average that we managed to work out. We looked at 15 different states, and $400 a ton would be extremely profitable for a processor and extremely enticing for a supplier.
It's,
Oh, I've got, Commissioner?
Yeah, could you explain the $400 a ton? That's what someone's paying? Is that what a hospital's paying, $400 a ton? Is that what that number is?
Peter, that's what was is estimating the averages, correct?
That's what.
Yes.
Yeah, so, but if you look at the little boxes and you add it up, you came up with a number of $3,000 a ton, is that correct?
That's what I'm not, what's the
Yeah.
400 versus the 3,000?
Yeah, so it's
Okay.
3,400.
Oh, I could say,
The hazardous, maybe.
I can
Essentially-
help, I can help that answer.
David?
I can help with that answer. The 30-pound boxes generally come from small practitioners, dentists, places like that. Whereas the hospitals, they create more volume. And they have what I know as IBCs, which are, a lot larger box.
Well, regardless of whether it's a box or it's not, what would a ton in the United States cost relative to a ton that you're processing in Europe?
Okay, if you're getting it directly from a
my,
hospital,
my question would be what it costs. What is someone willing to pay you?
That-
Hartford Hospital, they're writing a check for how much a ton? You have any idea what that would
I
be?
don't know I don't know, but I had a conversation with the doctor who runs the orthopedic, John Grady Benson. And I went through this with him, and he sits on the board of the hospital that makes, the strategic decisions. And he said, I'd be happy to push this. He said, if you look at my operating room, when I finish doing a knee or a hip surgery, it's a mess. And he goes, everything goes into red bag. He says, you're telling me that I could take the red bags and put this in there? And he goes, I'm all in,
I understand that. I guess what we're trying to do is establish what a comparable price would be on a ton in the United States and what it actually is in the United Kingdom.
Okay, so Peter, you're saying it's 450, 430, 450 pounds
okay,
per ton?
okay. In Connecticut, it's 685. That's probably the figure you're looking for.
$685
Yep,
versus what's the European rate? What's it cost? to
300,
dispose?
380 euro, so 1.1, call it $410.
Okay. That's what, one third the cost, what third more?
The reason I think you look at the numbers, so go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dave, finish it.
The state people told us we're doing 30,000 ton, 30 ton a day. So it's 150 a week, 7,500 a year. And that's $685. It's a $5 million a year business total in revenue. Not to say that's not something interesting, but doesn't really if it was just me, myself, and my garage, it'd be a pretty interesting business, but I'm not sure. Is that something the MDC wants to chase down? I don't know. That's why I want to see the numbers better.
That's the question.
So it's a $5 million a year business. So why isn't guys like Payne and the guys who do collections around here, pretty big companies. So why ain't they doing that, getting together and building a little Tech plant in the corner and say, instead of shipping it out?
We
I'm
haven't
just
talked to
curious.
them yet.
A $5 million a year business doesn't excite me that much for the MDC, to be honest with you.
I hear you. I spoke to John Rodas, who was the COO of St. Francis for 7 years, and I went through this with him. And he said, he said, the best way to do this would be to draw a circle around a metropolitan area, whether it's 25 miles or 50 miles, and go after all of the independents, the doctors, the dentists, the acupuncturists, the urgent clinics, and then also the hospitals. Because you can go in and you can undercut whatever they're spending.
So again, why isn't Payne and Waiting and all these?
We haven't
I'm trying to
spoken,
remember who
we
picks
haven't
up my
talked to
thing,
them
but-
yet. We
No,
haven't
but
talked to them yet.
why, again, I know you haven't talked about why don't those 4 or 5 companies, because I know they kind of don't compete against each other. If you ever own a business.
But again, it's the
Why-
liability issue. That's why they all got out of it.
Yeah, but now get back in by your, I just.
Exactly, well, yeah.
I mean, these aren't stupid people. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, no, it's a logical thought.
Fair enough.
Absolutely. What you're saying is
But the
right on target.
technology's not permitted in this country anyway, so you're talking, it's a circular discussion. Until you can get that technology approved. it can't
I
be
mean,
done.
again, I'm not again, I like this. It's not a big deal, but there's 5 or 6 really big companies that collect, and they're not guys with small pockets. And if they looked at this and said, this is $5 million, we got the trucks, we got everything, we build, I mean, they could get a permit as easy as we could. I'm just saying they got, but anyways, that's fine. I just trying to understand where we could fit in that, so.
Commissioner Patel?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I have a question to our CEO. Based on what I heard, what I read, what was sent to me, that theoretically, what is prescribed here is possible. But on a commercial scale, none is operating, even in Europe, where we can go and see things. Am I correct?
Commissioner, I apologize. I just want to clarify your question. You're asking what?
I'm asking that this theory is possible, it's experimental. Okay, and small scale different plants have been created in Europe, but none commercial where we can go and look at it and say, "Look, here it is operating and it is comparable." All cost and all other things should come much later.
Yeah.
First thing is it working and where it is working and what scale?
Yeah, so in the presentation that CDM presented, and that information is really in the Federal Register, which we presented as well. I think CDM said, I think we said it's the same plant. There's a plant operational, there's one plant operational. I believe it was California. Was it the, it's just pyrolysis, I think. It's just pyrolysis, making charcoal.
Yeah,
There was one plant that everyone recognizes through the Federal Register that's operational. It was on CDM's proposal. CTEC has indicated that they have, I think, 40, right, across Europe. So that's what we know to date. But in the United States, there's one. It's either the California Big Bear, was it Big Bear, Tom, or it was New Jersey, one of the
That's a
two.
pyrolysis.
We looked at both of those and they're not even remotely competitive with us. We're
Yeah,
doing-
right. It's just pyrolysis.
Yeah,
It was just pyrolysis and they're just making charcoal.
That's
They don't
right.
have both. They don't have the pyrolysis and the gasification.
Well, they're gonna have a problem, I would assume, is a thermal issue, that they can't produce the same thermal levels.
yeah. I mean, the key to understand is we're using pyrolysis and gasification within our process. Those technologies have been around for decades. The key, the differentiating thing here is Mike Burns, who founded this, is a recognized global expert on thermodynamics. So remember, we're clean thermodynamic energy conversion. It's the supercritical heat and the thermodynamic equation that ties us all together, which enables us to do what we do, and no one has been able to do it. And when we run into situations all the time where they're saying, when people say, "Oh, I've run into pyrolysis of gasification and they've failed." I said, "Yeah, what happened?" Well, a lot of times they're building them too big, they're scaling them too big, and then they're not working. And they also rust out, oxidize, so on and so forth. But they don't understand the thermodynamic component. And that's our secret sauce, and that's the key differential. And Peter can speak more to that than I can.
Commissioner, look, Commissioner Patel, let him finish up.
From the first day when you came in here, made a presentation, until now, based on my information which I received from all different sources, I'm not sure that this technology is it is still experimental and it is not operating anywhere on a commercial scale,
That's not true.
right?
No, it's been successfully for the last 7 years has operated throughout Europe.
Europe, you said Europe, and I proposed at one time that we can send some people from here to Europe. you give us the list where it is, and nobody came up with a correct list. So we need plant, location, of what capacity it is, what is it doing, and all these things, so we can send 3 or 4 people out to check it.
Yeah,
And we never got that clear answer.
No, that's not true.
Commissioner, I think we can get a list. We've never had we haven't had any discussions on going that far and doing that. We're just in an informational process. Maybe that's something we're gonna look at, but we can get the list of their operating facilities.
Yeah, if we can get the list for operating facilities, all this information details, then we can have our consultant look at those things and then
Cincinnati.
verify it and provide us the report. Then we should talk beyond that.
Well, that's an option. I'm just saying, what we're trying to do is listen to what they've done since the last time they were here. They got a list, we can get that list if that's the interest that the committee has, but we gotta go a little further than that. We don't have any money to do that. I'm just saying, would be an option, but there's a process we've got to go through. Commissioner Taylor?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I guess it's interesting because I think there are a couple of things going on here. I think first and foremost, we've got to overcome the regulatory hurdles within the state in terms of getting this process, I'm going to call it a process, permitted. And it seems to me that even before we get into the discussion of the economics, the question or the issue before us is whether or not out the box, this is something that we think that can move through the regulatory process and essentially be approved. And I guess that's why I keep asking the question, where is this operating? Is it operating in or close to or in the middle of population centers? What is the permitting process with regard to those operations that are in place? And are those standards tougher? Or are they the same as? Or are they lower than what we have to comply with in this country? Because if we don't get through that, I think that basically we're out of the game to begin with.
I think the standard issue, the European standard is significantly higher than the federal regulation.
Yes.
The California standard is significantly tougher than the federal, which the clean air stuff is. It's so that there are places where it does exist, and it exists in environments where the regulatory process is significantly more difficult.
Okay, well then that being the case, then I think it behooves us.
Excuse me, did I make that representation correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
By the way, we did supply a list of, I think maybe 30 places in Germany as part of the RFI. We did submit that. So,
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
You did, there's a list of locations, but
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
It's in there.
Wait a minute, wait.
that's
I mean,
appendix B, I think,
This isn't.
but look, I mean, look,
appendix B.
if that is the case, then why doesn't someone provide that or make that available to either us or to our consultants or staff? I mean, I don't care. Just provide it so that initially out the box, we've got some information that basically tells us that if we go down this avenue, we've got a better than even chance of basically jumping through the regulatory hurdles. Because I think that that's going to be something that we're going to have to overcome.
Yep.
Right? That's all I'm
Do you
saying.
mind- do you mind if I address who was just speaking there? I'm sorry, I don't have your name.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Taylor.
Yes, Commissioner Taylor. If it's of any help, and I don't know whether District Council legal beagles would be interested, but I can actually send a copy of an application to actually have a plant put on site It'll be under the UK legislation. But it might give the legal team within MDC a chance to have a look and say, okay, well, this is fairly similar questions and answers that we would have to go through as part of an air permit application with DEEP, if that's of any use.
Would that be, would we be far afield that that also should be provided to the people at DEEP in the state of Connecticut, since basically
Well-
we're,
Well,
Well, I guess you had a meeting in December.
yes, let me tell you
and
two
did
things
you
regarding
not
that.
Make that representation?
Yes, we have a law firm down in Washington DC, Vincent and Elkins. Senior partner that's works with us, has been in this space for 25 years. And he actually ran District 9 enforcement during the Trump administration at the EPA in DC. He wrote an opinion paper, which we supplied to everyone here, and we also supplied to everyone at DEEP, which showed that according to the way EPA looks at gasification, that we are fully compliant with the 3 rules on the books in DC for gasification. That all we need to do when we go into a locality is to get an air permit and get a construction permit. The air permit should not be difficult if we could get the regulatory body to take a real deep, hard look at what we actually put out, because there's nobody in the world that is putting out the emissions at this low. We know that.
from
We run
an,
into this all the time.
from a current operation?
Yep.
I mean,
It doesn't matter what we put in it, because because of the process, we are absolutely destroying all of that. And the emissions is, I mean, we're like 1,000 times lower in some cases than what the standard is, but we're usually at least 100 times lower. Now, we had Brown and Caldwell, who was a significant engineering firm, involved with wastewater treatment and other things as well. I met them in Portsmouth last year. They did a deep dive with all of their engineers, all of the top people in this. They liked so much that of what we presented that they are now putting us in their RFIs. So we just did an RFI for Portland, Maine that Brown and Caldwell is running. Jacobs Engineering, a $16 billion New York Stock Exchange company, did the same thing, deep dive. And we are now have been asked to put together a proposal for their Wilmington, Delaware wastewater treatment plant that they manage and operate over 100 wastewater treatment plants across the nation. CDM Smith, I met them last year in Portsmouth. We had a good conversation. I invited them to do a deep dive. We've been talking about it. I saw Eric here when CDM Smith did their presentation. I called his attention to it again, and he's trying to make that happen so that CDM Smith could do the same thing that Jacobs and Brown and Caldwell have done so far. So, you know, we're not hiding anything from anybody.
No, I don't, please, I don't want anyone to think that I'm.
No, I
trying to
understand.
hide anything, but I guess what I'm trying to do is to make sure that we get first things first out, so that we can get those issues resolved before we move farther down the road, in terms of getting into some of these other issues, which I think are particularly important. But I think in terms of generally the regulatory framework or hurdles that we have to move through, that is going to be important. And I think if your technology, lays out so that essentially we can blow those out, that puts us, I think, in a much better position in terms of then getting into the nuts and bolts in terms of making the decisions relative to the economics in terms of, is it medical waste, municipal solid waste, what have you.
But you could create microgrids in the state of Connecticut by combining medical waste, plastic, tires, fast fashion waste, the textile waste, because all that stuff's winding up in landfills.
Okay,
It's not
well,
just
well,
municipal
yeah.
solid waste.
Okay, that I think is a discussion that you have once we get through what I call the issues out the box. That is, where can these things be located? And more particularly, what are the regulatory hurdles that we have to clear? We've got environmental justice, which means air standards. We've got issues related to transportation and diesel fuels and things like that. And the expense of, transshipping the stuff to, Alabama or wherever the hell it goes. So I guess that's at least from my perspective, that's the kind of thing that I would like to see, or at least to have discussed, or to have our technical engineering people take a look at.
We fully agree.
Because-
Remember,
because
this was-
Because I'm hoping basically that, this stuff works.
Oh, yeah, it
Yeah,
works.
yeah, okay.
So just remember, this was a request for information that has taken forever to go through, okay? Took how many months to get to August, how many months to get to here? We're still at the starting gate as far as I'm concerned. So,
I'm finished.
Well, I mean, we've gone through the municipal solid waste issue here at one time, we had 76 towns we were servicing, 930,000 tons of garbage going through the South Meadows plant. And we had Deep spend 3 or 4 years trying to resolve the issue 6 or 7 years ago. It was a total disaster. And it's scary when you see that there are operating entities in other parts of the world that are meeting standards and standards far significantly higher than the standards we have set in the United States. And we still can't find, technologies operating and permitted in this country. And that's from EPA to DEEP and all over. We looked in this time all over the country. The only place we found that there, at least the response that we got, was from, I think you're right, it was California, and that was a pyrolysis.
yeah, it's like up
Process.
in Northern California.
Just totally
It's solely-
different.
It's just paralysis.
Yeah, pyrolysis. And then we had the other one. What was the,
There's one in Jersey, but it did close. I
Yeah.
forget what town.
That was Aries, right?
Aries, yes.
yeah.
And they also had one in Massachusetts that didn't work.
Right.
And then, but that's what technology is, to find the combination of technology that gets put together that can meet that standard. And it's just scary that we have that, how little we've done. And we just saw what happened in the legislature where they couldn't get approved the standard for 2000 and what's that? Electric cars only by the year 2035. 35. Okay? The issue isn't the electric car, it's the battery. And listen, I've got an electric car. It's got a battery in it. It's the battery's a traditional, what's the battery they use? Lithium battery. Lithium batteries don't work. You can't get the capacity out of them. Plus, the Chinese have all the lithium in the world tied up, and it doesn't work. And to get it out of the ground is an environmental nightmare. There are other processes that they're going through now, sodium battery bases that they're dealing with. But the battery's got to be more than in an electric car that you're spending $80,000 or $85,000 for, and it's got a battery life that'll run for about, they claim 250 miles. And depending on how you drive it in that 250 miles, you may get 160 miles out of it. And it's the battery. It's not the fact that the electric car won't work there. It's the ability of the battery to be able to handle the amount of electric output. And we're in a situation where we're saying, well, it's all got to come off the grid. Well, it's got to go off the grid if it's only got a 200-mile or 250-mile radius and your actual use is probably 140. It's not going to work in that concept. So it's technology. And the technology has been driven by what we're doing with data. Look what we did with the pandemic. They said it was 7 years before we would be able to solve the problem and find a way to an inoculation. And what did he do? 10 months we did it in. 10 months. So technology is changing dramatically. But to set a standard based on what we have right now and say you're going to close this down, any kind of combustion engine in 2035, you should be able to do it before that if the technology moves as fast as it's moving now in terms of what we're doing. But, I'm sorry, Dave.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back to what I was saying before. I mean, I have no problem with the CTEC thing, but to be honest with you, the medical technology to me, unless somebody tells me different, it's way too small for us to deal with it, unless we were already doing with it. I think we should be looking at this MYT. This was always interesting to me from the very beginning. That's what we should be looking at. With all the funnel coming maybe down to a CTEC unit at the bottom, but the MYT technology is what we should be looking at with a 70% recycling. In all due respect to Farmington, they ain't doing this in Farmington. I've said enough of these meetings. If it lets us all separate ahead of time and put in, you're not going to take all the trash and throw it to CTEC unit. You're never going to, going back to you said, you're not going to get permitted.
I don't think anybody's going to do it unless they can get a permit.
No, you missed what I say. The permit needs to be everything recycled. So go back to MYT.
Yeah.
Somewhat similar to that. Again, my first question, which you answered was nobody's doing in the United States, but we need to come in. Again, Farmington ain't gonna do this unless it's recycled. We sat there, these deep meetings with ending the food coming out at the top. I think which is ridiculous, but we need to come up with the 70% recycling he's doing. Maybe at the end, you put a couple CTECs at the bottom. I see technically nothing wrong with CTEC. I mean, environmentally, pollution wise, but we need to do the whole recycling thing and sit back and study. If we want to go into municipal waste, and I think we should, is the recycling separation, feeding them at the bottom, whatever it is. But that's what we should be studying right now. After all these little meetings, my personal opinion, that's what we should be doing. And we had Green come in. No, we had Green come in. The question I asked him, have you put any recycling systems in separation? And he said no. I mean, unless he missed my question, but he said, I've never seen it. There's no
Not
money in it.
Green. You're
CDM Green was the guy.
talking about Smith.
Smith. But he said they'd never done it. But I mean, maybe this MYT, again, I'm going to go back. I was interested at the beginning. If they do 70% recycling, that's what we should be looking at, maybe a little harder. The medical waste to me, I mean, it's nice, but $5 million business. If Payne and all these guys aren't interested, why would we be chasing that
But
down?
you don't know that they're not interested because they haven't been
No.
presented it yet.
That doesn't make a difference. It's a $5 million business for us. Who I mean, that's not even interesting to me.
Oh, I
And
think
we-
it's more than a 5
No,
million.
no. I
You're
just
you're
looked at the
minimizing
numbers.
it. I don't think you're looking at it correctly.
Well,
Then tell me again, I said last meeting, let's call somebody, but based on $680 a ton, it's a $5 million revenue business in the state of Connecticut.
That may be, I'm just saying, I don't believe we're getting the right information.
Could be.
You've got funeral homes, you've got a whole series of people that fall under that.
I
waste,
understand,
not
but that's
just-
what Deep said,
not just
30,000 a ton.
hospital waste.
I understand, but I said we need better numbers than that. Maybe it's even bigger.
Someone from Deep has got their hand up.
Gabrielle Fergon.
Gabrielle, I'm sorry.
You took it down.
Hi. Thank you. I did want to simply address a couple of things regarding permitting and environmental justice. Just as an FYI, the environmental justice law is more than just air emission standards. It requires engagement at the community level as well as the local official level. And it potentially requires a comprehensive environmental benefit agreement between the applicant or the prospective applicant and the municipality. It is triggered by the need for air and solid waste permits. And there's going to be additional regulation that has to be developed in order to implement all of the aspects of the new environmental justice law. So it isn't, I just want to make it clear that it is not simply a law that triggers air standards being implemented. The other aspect regarding permitting is that there's lots of conversations happening regarding lots of different technologies. The issue isn't whether or not it would get permitted. The issue is whether or not the prospective developers are amenable to the level of risk that they're going to assume regarding the technology. Nobody wants to put money towards technology that hasn't been proven. And I think that's basically evidenced through your discussions here today, that if there's certainty regarding the technology, then people are willing to invest and invest heavily in technology that may solve, a significant problem, such as a lack of capacity in state for disposal of MSW.
I'm not following that logic.
That's so far down.
Mr. Sinclair, he's from Deep. Let's hear that. Mr. Sinclair?
So I just wanted to augment one thing that Gabby was saying about the applicability of the environmental justice statute. MDC is already an affecting facility. So from that standpoint, the way the statute is written, any new permit that you require for your facility could trigger the EJ statute, which would require, in this instance, definitely the community engagement and also definitely the execution of a community environmental benefit agreement. So I think you need to really have your attorneys pay attention to what the EJ statute says and to really give you a briefing on what the environmental statute says, the environmental justice statute says, and how it applies to the facility. Augmenting also what Gabrielle said about permits. There is seemingly a perception that this individual, whoever your developer is, or the salesperson speaking to you, is going to be able to dictate whether or not you would be able to get a permit. There are two aspects to the permitting process. One is the technical review, which is ones and zeros, just numbers. Do I meet particular standards? But there is also a semi-subjective aspect to this. Depending on the size of the project, you would have to demonstrate that there is a need for the project and that the pollution associated with the project the benefits of the project outweigh the pollution associated with the project. And that is not an easy bar to cross. So I just want to be very clear about what some of the regulatory and statutory burdens are, and that, the MDC has their attorneys looking at these things in the background.
Thank you.
How environmentally just is it to ship it all around the world and have a carbon footprint where you're polluting every other state while you're doing that? I just don't get that.
That's not an issue that we're
I know, but just think about it.
I understand.
It's
but-
environmentally just to do that if it goes somewhere else.
But what's interesting in the question that was asked, the location and where they are, and this is in Appendix B, that the information that was provided to us, there's 67 locations, according, if I'm reading this right, in the years that they were built, from 2016 through 2022. Is that what a QTR in your, this is the information you provided?
Yes.
Is that individual facilities or is that the number of units?
Peter, that's individual facilities, correct?
No,
Or
there's
is it the number?
there's some doubles. I don't know how many doubles there are. Germany, they're all singles. France has some doubles, singles in the UK. Just not sure
Okay,
where all the doubles are,
excuse
to be
me.
honest.
Peter, according to your Appendix B, Central European installations ranging from 1.1 MW to 5.2 MW, there, I believe, are 25.
Yeah, well, the bigger, yeah,
They have 67 units within that 25, those 25 locations. Now, that's through 2022. I assume there's probably more than that now.
yeah, well, the fives are
Exactly.
double plants or
Yeah,
triple
because
plants.
you have some that are quads, you got some that are doubles, some
Yeah.
have three, some have one. So you actually have 20, at least through 2022, you had 25, I believe it was, 25 facilities with 67 specific units in them. So
Yeah, so
there is
the,
an
the
enormous
easy
amount.
way to work it out is that a single plant is going to produce about 1.5. So on that list, if there's plants that actually show greater, then you know you can bet your bottom dollar there's more than one plant on that site.
Gabrielle? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to again respond to the environmental justice question that was posed, which was, how fair is it to ship it? The state is not in favor of shipping waste out of state. The state seeks self-sufficiency. And you can certainly take a look at the comprehensive materials management strategy that I believe we raised as a document worth evaluating during our pre-application meeting that's on our website. And the state's goal is specifically disposal self-sufficiency. So the state is not in favor of exporting MSW out of state to other municipalities that would have to bear the undue burden of waste that was generated not, in their community or in their state.
I'm aware of that. That's, I just posed that because it was this, I knew that was the answer.
I guess the question that I'd have is why isn't the state more aggressive? Why isn't DEEP more aggressive in the areas of looking at technologies that make some sense and are applicable?
So as opposed to MDC, we're actually the regulatory arm of the state for environmental matters and energy matters. We're not in the business of providing services. We're in the business of regulating those services. So we're not charged with solicitation of technology or infrastructure. Recently, we were provided the limited authority to look at funding infrastructure, and we are in the process of evaluating or evaluating how we're going to develop an RFP. We went out to RFI for infrastructure, got some responses, but the amount of grant funds that are available are very small and would probably fund only very small scale infrastructure development. We're not talking, anaerobic digester size facilities. We're talking about funding maybe windrow composting in a municipality. But again, I want to underscore, we're not in the business of soliciting. We're the regulatory agency. So we entertain proposals that others come to us with concepts and potentially locations, and we can work with proposers to find brownfields areas that can be redeveloped, et cetera. That's our function, as well as writing permits to regulate the safe and responsible operation of those facilities.
I understand. You're right. That's a statutory responsibility that you have. I guess my concern is a community like Hartford, that the Department of Health, in an article in the Hartford Courant a week ago on the front page, discussed the whole question of air quality and discharge into the environment in Hartford, and what's happening, and the asthmatic levels in Hartford for Hispanic and African American exceed almost any place in the country. So it's happening there. Mr. Sinclair, you want to add into this? Go ahead.
So that's precisely why this is an environmental justice issue with respect
That's
to
right.
the city of Hartford. To the extent that you already have a facility there that is burning sludge, that is a major stationary source of NOx and carbon monoxide, and you are entertaining the potential to emit additional pollution at that facility, where you are taking waste from places other than Hartford, that becomes the issue of environmental justice for the city of Hartford. Why do the residents of the city of Hartford have to bear that burden of dealing with the trash and the emissions associated with dealing with that trash from other parts of the state? That is the fundamental purpose behind the environmental justice statute. So
I understand that. And I represent the city of Hartford. That's my concern. That is my motivation for the formation of this committee at MDC that's dealing with that issue. And we're looking for an alternative technology that can address it. And when you look at least what's being represented from CTEC, the differential in the numbers are significant. I think they reduce it down to almost what, 1 or 2% from where we are right now.
So the question becomes there at that point is, are you replacing the capacity that you have at the current facility with something that emits less, or are you adding something to the site that emits less than Mira did, but still
I
adds
understand what
pollution
you're
to the
saying.
site?
What I'm saying is we have what we have, which has been approved. And I'm saying that standard, in my opinion, is not something that we should be sitting here accepting. That's why this committee went out for a search in terms of what can do it better, what improves the quality of air in the city of Hartford, because that affects East Hartford, Hartford, and Weathersfield in the summer, as you're well aware of. And, I've been in this community for 80 years. And the last time we changed the technology was 1961? So, I mean, that's the purpose of this committee. We inform this because, it's to find out, where does something exist? And the only thing we've stumbled upon is the CTEC. And, it's not in the front page of the Hartford Current, your Department of Health in the state of Connecticut is raising the question about our air quality.
Just a quick question. Based on everything I hear, basically DEP really has no skin in the game whatsoever how to stop the trash from going to Ohio. It's just
Well,
amazing.
the legislature.
No skin in the game at all. No skin in the game at all. It's just amazing to me.
The legislature is struggling with this issue too.
Yeah, I'm with you,
right
but
now.
they
It's
work for the
not-
legislature.
it's
I
not
don't know.
they're not they're looking the other way. They've got statutory responsibilities, DEEP.
I'm with you. Just the only thing, anything someone else comes up with,
We're
they
not,
just regulate it. They don't help coming up with anything, but I just, okay.
Chairman,
yes, Commissioner.
Commissioner Adler, so, move this along, the, we've been provided locations, we've been provided quite a technological information. We did talk about getting a consultant. I think we agreed on moving forward with that. So shouldn't we be
We
moving?
agree with getting a consultant?
I thought we did at the last meeting.
I don't think so.
No, there was a representation.
Right.
There were.
It was an item that we removed.
We didn't.
No,
we didn't do it.
it was in the discussion, those were questions. I think Commissioner Patel raised the question of,
Right. He just said.
So we need an entity beyond staff who's done a great job of getting us to this point, but yeah, an entity that can independently review. Is it now? Do we go to a CFP? I'm sorry, request for proposals at this point? But we can't just sit here and, continue to debate back and forth, without getting some progress. And I think the progress has got to be my recommendation is to hire a consultant in this area. Can take the data from CTEC and from whoever else, and get us into the request for proposals, move us along.
well, if the response if there was a response to that relative to what we got on the search or something, I'm not sure we're gonna get, much.
Well,
Much of a
we can't
response.
just go with CTEC without some kind of.
Well, I'm not
process,
saying,
but-
I'm not saying we go with CTEC. I'm just saying this frustration is here. That Europe is doing I'm sure CTEC isn't the only operator in Europe that's dealing with this issue. You're probably the only ones that decided to try to bring it to the United States because the quality of the product is better than what exists here. But what I guess you can't do is you can't find a place to test it or a way to test it.
Well, you know, the test bed legislation that exists currently in this state, I'm, Gabrielle can correct me if I'm not right on this, but I believe that you know, new technologies can be tested for 60 days. And if they pass, then they should be able to be used in the state. And that test bed technology exists. That was passed in 2015 and it sits under DEEP's jurisdiction. Actually, it was passed in 2009 or 10 first, and then
Okay, Peter, I'll get to you after, because this is relative to Mr. Sinclair has his hand up again. So, Jameson, could you please go
So
ahead?
just quickly, the test bed statute and the programs that it allows for does not circumvent or supersede permitting needs for whatever the activity is. The most recent proposals have generally been things that deal with energy efficiency and things like that, where you know, I'll give you an example of one that I had to administer when I was the office director responsible for that program in 2013, 14. Someone came forward, said, I got a better light bulb that reduces energy use relative to your typical sodium high intensity light bulb that we would have outdoors in the garages and et cetera. And somebody offered to put those light bulbs in a garage, and they measured the energy use for that particular facility to see if it met what was specified. Those are the types of things that have come forward most frequently under the test bed program. I the program is administered through the Bureau of Energy and Technology Policy. I would say definitely converse with them on that program and how it may be available. But I just wanted to point out that it does not supersede the necessity for any types of permits.
No, I don't, I agree with you. Uh, First, could I have, is it something relative to what Mr.
Well,
Sinclair?
I don't know if it's relevant or not, but I mean, seems to me, there's two things here. One is, are we?
No.
I'm sorry. Are we focusing strictly on CTEC, or are we saying that CTEC is one of maybe other possible technologies that we can use in this matter? And that those basically are in Europe, for lack of a better term or phrase, because it seems that we're striking out in the US. If that is the case, are we going to take a look and basically wring this thing out in terms of deciding whether or not CTEC basically is the best available? Or are we going to try to take a look in Europe and see if it's CTEC and other technologies? Because I think at some point here, we got to decide, because we just sort of keep running in a circle here. At least from my point of view, CTEC seems to be the best of what we've seen and heard of. And I don't know if anyone has got anything out there better. But it also seems to me that we need to make a determination by, and I think it's simple. You go and take a look and you talk to the regulatory people there, and you take a look at the data and you make some kind of decision. I mean, either it does what they say that they can do, and the people in Europe are going to tell you that, or it doesn't. And if that is the case, then we walk away from it. But right now, I think, I think we're spinning our wheels here. And I think that we're wasting a lot of time.
Well-
I would strongly recommend that we ferret out from these folks the information that we need and understanding full well that, you know, we're going to have to deal with the regulatory hurdle. Okay. All right. And I understand that. But the fact of the matter is, we got to make sure that what they're telling us is the case. And the data shows that they do what they say they can do. And then I think at that point, it then becomes much easier, I think, to deal with what I call the second level issues, which basically is all of the regulatory stuff, including the environmental justice stuff that we're going to have to deal with. But I think we're going to have stuff that we can show people that, yeah, that is the case. This is the data. This is where they're operating. These are the regulatory people that you can talk to, and they can tell you, all right? And I think that once we get to that position, then I think we can decide where we want to go. But I think until we do that, I just don't think we've got any kind of really solid information to be making any decisions on. But that's my own crazy view.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Curry. Couple of things in regard to what the commissioners have said regarding site visitation. Another commissioner has mentioned and asked where the plants are located, urban, suburban, rural. In addition to, and I think Commissioner Taylor, in asking that question of where they're located, if in fact we do a site visitation, whether physically or Zoom, I think it's much more than that. I think we need to talk with the people, the towns that have contracted, the cities that contracted for the plant, and we need to talk to the leaders of the towns and communities that live adjacent to the plant, so we get a total picture. And in response to what Mr. Sinclair had said, and especially his analogy with light bulbs, I have a lamp next to my chair and it has 2 light bulbs. When they came out with the great LED much higher use in terms of less electricity, I would never think of putting only one in and leaving an old one in. And when I voted to create this committee, I never envisioned that we would build a new house next to an old house and keep the old house running. And I would be extremely disappointed if that was the case. We have an opportunity, and I represent East Hartford, and we're impacted by this facility in Hartford. And to suggest that we would do otherwise, if this committee were to even offer that up as a proposal, I would be extremely disappointed. And in regard to medical waste, and I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, I would be not so quick to throw away. There's a lot of numbers out there, and we really need to gather them. But
We haven't got
one number is just for hospitals. They're saying that each hospital bed creates 33 pounds of waste per day. Now, I don't know what that equates to, and I don't know how many beds all the hospitals in the area have.
1,200 beds at Hartford
But
Hospital.
when you throw in all the other facilities, whether they whatever they may be, medical facilities, small and semi-large, I mean, the number may be enough to warrant a good look at. I mean, you know, you threw out 5 million to 7, 10, you know, pretty soon we're talking real money. So I just want that to.
Well, medical is hazardous waste, and it also includes funeral homes and a whole series of other people that are in that. So, you know, it's.
I did have a question for Chris, though. 2 questions. The plant in Germany, is that not located on a tributary to the Rhine? You know that?
Peter, can you answer that?
No,
So we just don't know
I
the
can't.
answer to that.
No, I can't answer it.
We could check.
Um, Yeah.
I think it
I'd
is.
have to, I'd have to do a Google on the map, to be honest with you.
And the other, in talking about site visitation, and the question I guess would be for Bob, our upcoming budget, even with adjustments that are going to be made, there'll be funds available if it's needed, for a commissioner to travel, to make site visitations.
There is a small travel budget currently in the proposed budget. I think $25,000 is what was currently proposed.
But that may be
After
reduced.
adjustment, there's still,
And after, yeah, we'll be talking about the adjustments that a committee had made to reduce or to add $100,000 worth of expense. So we have a recommendation that travel budget would be reduced by $10,000. So there'd be 15 total.
Okay.
Uh,
That's strictly for commissioners.
I have a question.
And that's in the district board's budget, yes.
Could I ask a question on the same, you've got the floor. How large is our reserve right now? 35 million?
Oh, you know what?
That's the max.
Don't have it, but it's about 33% of our $204 million budget this year. So whatever that works out to be about, or I'm sorry, 33% of our sewer budget, which is about 100 million. So it's in the mid 30s.
Because I know it maxes out, that's when we start taking money.
we're within the range.
When we exceed 35%, the board has a fund balance policy that will maintain a reserve between 30 and 35% of the sewer, our general fund's total revenues, which is about 100 million. So it's between 30 and 35 million dollars.
Similar to the state.
And a couple of years ago, we went up to 38%, and we immediately swept that back and used it to reduce the ad valorem
Expense, right. Kelly, did you have something to say on that?
No, I wanted to clarify something that was said earlier, but it's fine.
Okay,
But-
sorry. Let me, you first met with us, Chris. I think it was Scott, myself, and was it Chris?
Chris Stone,
It was
yes.
Chris Stone. What was that, about 2020?
We met, you and I met 2 years ago now. And then the three of us met in April after that.
Of 2022?
Yep.
I
Okay,
think it was 21, but.
21.
whatever,
I
yeah.
think it was 21. I think Scott's
Yeah,
right.
I think it was, I think it
21.
was, I can't remember, but I think it was in that February timeframe of 2021.
But anyway, you at that time had articulated a pilot program for your situation. Have you had any success in finding someone that was willing to do a pilot? And what was the representation you made on a pilot? I can't even remember. I know it was a
Well,
period.
at the time, we were saying that we'd put a unit in here for like 60 days. And if it proved out, you'd have to buy it. Because it costs money to do that. It's,
Or if it didn't prove out, that you.
then we just take it out and go. And we actually have an LOI right now from UConn. Stores,
Letter of credit?
letter of intent,
Oh, a letter of
intent,
intent,
LOI.
LOI.
We actually also have an LOI from Narragansett Bay Commission in Rhode Island. We were on with the Department of Environmental Management last
Well,
week.
that would be the first pilot that DEEP would be able to evaluate. You'd have to go through air permitting,
Yeah.
wouldn't you?
Absolutely, as Gabrielle articulated before.
Yeah.
May I come in now?
Peter?
Yes. Mr. Sinclair, you mentioned something when you were talking about existing MDC facilities, which really excited me. Part of the CTEC, what we do, not only do we destroy, but we also monitor and then sell credits. Obviously CO2, particle matters, SO2. The word you mentioned was NOx. Now, NOx really excites us because that's worth $40,000 a ton, whereas in the States, we would only get $28 a ton for carbon. If we're clever, we can sell it into the European market for $100 a ton. But NOx is CTEC loves NOx. We really love it because it's an economic opportunity. I just backing up to Councillor Taylor when he was talking about part of the permitting. Whilst this chat's been going on, I've actually emailed to Lisa Madison a copy of an application for a site in the UK. So Chris, I've sent that to you as well. So you guys might want to, well, it's up to you whether you want to throw it at your legal team. Chris, you'll need to handle the sending that off to Deep for them to have a look at. And also Yukon, the word Yukon's just come up. We're actually a little bit further down the line than a simple LOI. In the last 48 hours, we've received all their engineering data for connecting to the grid, etc. And we have 2 private enterprises that actually want to buy those projects off us, which is a bit of a shame because we wanted to keep that. Now the Yukon, it processes everything. So their sludge, their medical and all their municipal. It's not huge volume. Their total tonnage is just under 8,000 short ton a year. Plus, interesting enough, they've got tyres as well. So there's a fair chance that it'll either be Yukon as the first cab off the rank for a permit application in Connecticut, or still potentially Farmington. But they're 2 completely different plants. The Farmington is a dedicated sludge with municipal or another waste stream added. Yukon is a multi-purpose plant. So in other words, you throw at it whatever's available at the time.
Peter, is the references is that one CTEC unit that you would be doing?
Yes, the Yukon is a single unit with a not our traditional sludge drying because their volume's not big enough. Farmington is a double unit.
Okay. Okay, questions? Further questions?
Yeah.
Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, yes, Commissioner Hoffman. I want to go back to something that Commissioner Curry sparked for me, and it brought me all the way back to the beginning of Chris's presentation. Chris has left the room at the moment, so I'll pass to the next person who wants to make a question or a comment.
He's back. Oh, he's back.
Oh, just in the nick of time. Chris, I was just saying that I wanted to go back to something that you articulated early in your presentation. And unless I misheard it, which I may have done, you said, as I remember and understood, that all of the medical waste that needs to be destroyed, to whatever degree, was landing as the final location in either Tennessee or Kentucky, somewhere mid-south, I believe you said.
For the East Coast.
Oh, for the East Coast. Well, even so.
So it's Virginia and it's either Tennessee or Kentucky for the second one. I'm not sure which one it is.
Okay, so that's a quarter of the country.
Or
Perhaps.
third, whatever, yeah.
Or so. So it hit me that anybody who sees or imagines or runs into the situation of medical waste daily, that this is an incredible amount of waste that has to be destroyed.
And they're incinerating it.
Well, yeah, however they do it. You weren't specific to that, but that's fine. And I would appreciate the rest of that story. But when you imagine the amount of waste that we're talking about, and I would, I guess, disagree with my friend Commissioner Drake, that maybe we should be going after this. Because it seems like an
Enormous market.
enormous amount of waste that has to be handled.
I think we have to get more information,
30,000 tons a day.
but
Yeah, I'm not trying to.
No, wait, but that's not very much.
well, I think there's far more than that, David.
That's
But
what we should find out.
it's-
Maybe.
Depends on who's giving it to you. And what we got from staff was a limited amount because they have a very limited amount of time to do it.
Well, I'm sorry, I wasn't here at last meeting, but that information came from Deep.
Right, came from.
From-
Deep,
from
30,000 a
Gabrielle,
day,
so-
right.
And she did, in all her fairness, she did say that she was gonna look for some, that was old information. She was looking for some updated
But my point is,
information.
before, this is important information before we dive in.
Yeah,
It's
but that
not very-
is,
It's not a lot.
that information has come from Deep.
Yeah, mine wasn't a criticism.
Yeah, no, and what Deep has said, to be fair to Deep, is the way in which the permitting process, and the trucking protocols, they don't have to report through Deep.
If it's not a
So
step
they don't really have control over those numbers, as years in past, but those numbers came from Deep.
But I mean, I think there's got to be other ways that we can find what a real market is out there. And it'd be something we should probably try to pursue further. If we can get
Yeah,
that
we'll
information.
follow up with Gabrielle. She was gonna be looking.
Also, it
for-
was a short period of time. You only gave you a week,
Yeah.
you know.
And just a short follow-up that I guess I can direct to you, Chris, and that is the mention of UConn. I'm assuming you mean the University of Connecticut.
Yes, in the stores campus.
Okay, great. At the Stores campus, somehow that is going to be allowed by DEEP.
Well, we're not assuming that. We just know that we have a letter of intent
Well, that's where it's got to
and
go.
we have the financing behind
Go
it.
to state.
They have fully interest, so we have to go through that next step. Yes.
Yeah, just trying to clear the air.
And by the way, they want to take the so red bag waste is the medical waste. The black bag is the just paper waste and so on in hospitals and doctors' offices.
Yeah, yeah.
They want to take all of the red bag waste out of UConn Farmington's, medical school, dental school, hospital, et cetera, and bring it over there because they're spending a fortune getting rid of it otherwise.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I need to just come back on the medical. Irrespective of how big or small the industry is, New Haven only processing medical, and this is what needs to be looked on. Doesn't matter whether it's a $5 million industry a year or a $50 billion industry. What you look at is the tipping fee, the volume available, and bearing in mind one plant only processes 18 ton a day. Okay, just do the tipping fee calculation to the capital cost of the plant. See how quick the payback is. So your return on capital is borders on being criminal. That's the secret.
Thank you, Peter. Are there further questions? Kelly, question. We're now at the end of this process, I would think. We haven't had anybody else request to come in or anything else. When do we terminate this and start to look at other options?
I think at the last meeting, we discussed that the RFI process
That's
is
what I'm saying,
complete.
the RFI.
Your process as an RFI is complete. We've completed the process.
Unless the committee wants to bring somebody else back in. but-
No, I understand, but I'm just saying,
No, that's right.
we, I, we could have to have another committee meeting and determine where we're going and what we're gonna do now. Which is interesting, if UConn does have a letter, sent you a letter of interest, there could be a pilot program done with UConn or, you don't know, you aren't that far down the road with it.
Well, I mean, Farmington would go tomorrow if we could get it permitted there.
Well, but again, I think to do that, it's quite obvious that there's
I know,
gotta be a
there's a process.
process.
Yes.
The deep has gotta obviously, because they're the regulatory agency here, so they would have to
Yep.
do that, I would assume, so. I guess, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Through you, I understand you said that there were 2 US-based engineering firms that were,
That had done a deep dive with us. So I met them personally at Nebra's conference in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, last year. And, they assembled their engineering team and we did Zoom calls. They asked all the critical questions they needed to ask. So Brown and Caldwell was one of them. And, based on that, they are now putting us in their RFIs. So they're handling the RFI for Portland, Maine. So we just submitted our answers for that recently. Jacobs Engineering, as I mentioned before, $16 billion New York Stock Exchange company, manages over 100 wastewater treatment plants throughout the country. They did a deep dive. They now have asked us to submit a proposal on the Wilmington, Delaware wastewater treatment plant. So, I mean, everybody's going through the process. So no one's been turned off by anything that we've said. And CDM Smith has expressed interest to do the deep dive. They just haven't gotten it together to do it yet. But we expect that they will sometime very soon.
Okay, I'm gonna say, let's process what we heard here today and we'll schedule another meeting so the committee can sit down and kick around what, I don't want to run everybody 3 hours at their time this afternoon. Chris, thank you for and Peter, thank you
You're
for
welcome.
your contribution.
And by the way, there were 2 videos that are, on ice here that everybody should have a chance to look at. I'm not suggesting you look at them now. One is an 8-minute video for MYT, and it walks you through the entire process. And then another is
We have copies of that?
yes, Lisa has them, and she gave them to the tech.
They were ready to show.
They were actually ready to show in August. We didn't
Okay,
get to
well,
'em.
maybe that's something.
That you guys could just
Let
do
the
on your
committee
own.
come back together and determine what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
And again, thank you for coming in. It was a very informative meeting. And thank Deep for being involved in this. Obviously, they left. But we appreciate that, Deep sitting in on this and hearing what we're hearing. But I think this was a point well taken. They are the regulatory.
Yeah, no question about it.
That's the legislature is looking very closely at the garbage issue right now.
When I spoke to Chairman Steinberg, he said, "Why didn't we know about you last year?"
Yeah. Well, they're back in another 2 months.
Yep.
Okay, is there any further, let's see, I got a Commissioner's request for future agenda.
General public comments.
Opportunity for general comment. Judy, we're gonna move the podium over where you sit. You could have come right up and sat. You could have sat at one of the things and.
Judy Allen, West Hartford. Most of my comments are in the form of questions. Right from the beginning, what happens to the glass, metal, asbestos, et cetera, that you can't process? Where does that go? Is styrofoam one of the things that you can process? Are soda cans, do they fit into the metal classification? So a lot of questions about that, and understanding that DEEP wants as much recycling as opposed to incineration or some kind of process that would incinerate and get rid of it that way. in terms of water being something that could be used for agricultural processes, does Connecticut have enough agricultural, close enough to even be able to make use of water like that? I have a lot of questions about how this can apply to Connecticut right here. And I'm hearing a lot of apples compared to oranges that just confuse the process for me. Plastics come in a lot of different formats, and they are, at least the first generation of plastics, use fossil fuels, which is not something that grows. And so my question is, why are some plastics able to be used with the new technology and some of it would become something else? Question, but I keep finding- Sorry. In terms of the environmental justice community, I'm wondering if that isn't something, if you're interested, if that isn't something that needs to happen right away. Because I am sure the folks in Hartford do not want anything that has the word waste or trash in its title to be used anywhere near Hartford.
That's true.
And again, it doesn't make sense to me to compare Europe with the United States in terms of technology. Europe is a whole different ball of wax. We need to be more interested in the realities of what can happen in the United States. I think Commissioner Taylor was asking great questions about what the current regulations here are in Connecticut. It would seem to me that CTEC would have that already, an understanding of what the state requires in terms of regulations, because you can't move forward if you can't meet those kinds of things. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further issues, the motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Without objection, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Wild.